Oklahoma Superintendent Ryan Walters wants to have a video played of him praying for Trump, and he has already spent $6 million on Bibles. Is this a good thing? I'm Brooke Gurley, Professor Brooke Gurley, and I'm here again with my father, Pastor Jerry Gurley, and we're here to discuss this. So, Dad, let's get right into it. Who is Ryan Walters? I know he's the superintendent. He wants to have this video of him praying for President Trump. But give us a little background. Do you have any background on who he is?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the short answer is that he's a cultural warrior in the state of Oklahoma. He's 39 years old. Prior to being the superintendent of schools for which is an elected position in Oklahoma, he was the appointed Secretary of Education. He has some history in running nonprofit organizations related to education that were funded by ultra-conservative billionaire funders like the Walton Family Foundation, the notorious, infamous Koch brothers foundations. So he is a extremely to the right, anti-woke, anti-critical race theory advocate, a warrior. He's a person who comes to this job with a mission, and that is to sanitize American history, because his background is in teaching world history in the public school system in Oklahoma and American history. And he has a view, and that view is somewhat shaded by his version and his vision of Christianity. That's the short on this gentleman.
So a few things you said. He taught world history and has a view. What is his view? Like, for example, does he have a position on Native American history and African American history? Because if you're telling me he's anti-woke already, I'm thinking, is he really?
The short of that is that, for example, you may have heard of Governor DeSantis in Florida at some point in your life. You may have heard
disastrous. I know him. Yes.
Well, the state of Florida entered into partnership with this particular company that produces curriculum that is America first. America is great. America can't do any wrong. America never did any wrong. America is God's chosen vessel in the earth. That kind of curriculum. And Florida has been advocating that public students in the state of Florida learn through that literature that's been produced by that publisher. Well, this guy, Ryan Walters, is also affiliated and associated with a similar publisher to teach similar subjects, or to take similar approaches to the issues of race in this country, how Americans treated the Native Americans, the indigenous people, and this idea, this softening that slavery wasn't such a bad idea. In some ways, it was a mutual exchange. The Africans were brought from that miserable place called Africa and refined and given the great gift of faith in Jesus Christ. And actually, it was a job training program. So remember, that's what the publishers in Florida were presenting. And so Ryan Walters' perspective is something similar to that.
So basically, he's about propagating a lie about American history. That's what I'm hearing, that he wants to sort of do away. It's propaganda, right?
Romanticizing the horrific history of America, the founding of America, as relates to building literally on the bodies and the backs of indigenous people and people of African descent who were enslaved.
So that's interesting. So you have on the one hand I don't want to say watered down, but it's like the erasure of certain history of African Americans, of indigenous people, of the brutality that they face. You have this erasure that, in my mind, is basically a lie, that he's promoting. And yet, on the other hand, he wants to pray and put Bibles into school. So what do you think is at play here? Like, why is there this kind of, on the one hand, I want to present a lie or erasure of people. And then on the other hand, but I love God, so let's pray. I'm going to pray for our president or elect, and I'm going to spend $6 million on Bibles. What's going on?
So the short answer for me is hypocrisy. The secondary answer is what I would refer to as performative Christianity. That is to say, your reason for saying these things is really not something that you truly believe in your heart and your mind, your soul, but you're performing because you want people to see you a certain way, think of you a certain way. I also happen to think, as relates to this particular actor, Ryan Walters, that he's actually auditioning for a position in Donald Trump's incoming administration. But performative Christianity is at the heart of all of this, in my mind. And let me further elaborate on what I mean by that. You know, performative Christianity is one that put emphasis on symbolism and not substance. If Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes and the members of the Sanhedrin, he was rebuking them for performative Judaism. He talked to them about the fact that they washed cups and they went through ceremonial ablutions, which is washing and cleansing, but they were compared in his mind to whited sepulchres, which are ornate and decorative and well taken care of on the outside, but full of dead men's bones on the inside. And so it's a dead man's bones approach. That's what I think.
So it's performative and it's also auditioning, which goes towards the idea of performative Christianity. So then am I hearing, do you think it's a good idea? Because even if someone has a particular
Were you
mission
paying
in
attention?
mind, but I'm saying even if someone has a good idea, a bad idea or bad motives, they're doing performative work. They're also auditioning. Is it still nevertheless good? Because if you see in the video where he's saying that he's praying for for Trump, where Walters is praying for Trump, he says that the problem is in the schools, we begin to decline when we took prayer out of the schools. You know, that's when we're no longer leading in the nation.
That's nonsensical. Society began to decline. First of all, can we go back to making sure that we straighten the record about when people talk about making America great again? For Native Americans and for people of African descent who were enslaved in the Americas, tell us when that time was when America was great for all people, my people, Latinos, and people from the Sioux tribe, from the Seminole tribe, and various other indigenous people. When was America great? So we have to, every time that we're presented with that false narrative, that there was a place and time in America where we were glorious and we were great and we were godly, we have to say, no. This form of Christianity that was introduced into the Americas was an aberrant, distorted, impure, and commercialized form of Christianity, and it was never great, never great. So we have to just speak to that. But having said that, there was some orientation, and I'll grant that, toward Christianity more than any other recognized religion. And we begin to wane in terms of that, not when the Bibles were taken out of the schools or when prayer was taken out of the schools, but when people stopped praying for themselves and for their children in their homes. You see, prayer left the houses first, and people left the houses of prayer first and became more secular. And then lastly, prayer is taken out of school as a last event in a series of events. So we have to set it in historical context.
So you're saying there was already a departure from the faith
in
general that was happening, and then the removal of prayer in school was just sort of the last symptom of that. But there's still this
symptom. I think I like that word better. This is an indicator of something much larger that's happening that I do think deserves our attention.
So what then, though, do you say to someone like Ryan Walters was saying in the video, that we were founded on Christian principles? This is a Christian nation. I know you said an aberrant version of that, but there are some people who really do believe that this is a Christian nation, that people came over. So the narrative is that you have the Puritans coming over for religious freedom, we codify that in the First Amendment. And so we have a right to practice our faith. And that's what this video is. He even says in the video that he's not trying. If you don't want to pray, you don't have to, which I think is just a nod to the Kennedy case with the praying coach, where the court said, it wasn't coercive. And I think that's why he said that in his video, because somehow he's trying to protect himself constitutionally. I don't think that's going to work, because clearly
I don't think it passes.
Superintendent is working. Well, I think if the superintendent is the person making the prayer and telling everyone, play this video of me praying, it's going to be coercive. There's no way around it, saying that you don't have to join when the head leader of education is praying.
There's some pushback already on that. So this matter, there's some pushback already in Oklahoma on that question, in terms of this video, in terms of every class having a Bible. Again, having a Bible in the classroom or in your house is not in and of itself an assurance that you're going to be a godly person and that you're going to live a godly life. I think the issue really is not having the Bible in your house, but having the Bible in your heart. Right. Now, if I was in church, I would say amen. And then perhaps if we were riding in a car, some people might say that'll preach. Not in your house, in your heart. And we have to get back to what is the central function of the school itself, public schools. What is the role? And then once we clearly define what that is, then we want to talk about how does the Bible or any other religious book contribute to the mission of the public school system. And I don't know. So my concern is, so many people that are talking about the Bible being not in school, they don't have Bibles in their houses. If they do, they don't read them. The people that talk about the prayer not being in school, they don't pray at home. They don't even pray over their chicken.
Chicken.
So or whatever, their steak or their escargot or whatever they're eating.
They're not eating escargot. They're not eating escargot.
Whatever. They are not.
That's not what they chicken. You were right with chicken.
Okay.
You were right with chicken.
Yeah.
But okay, actually, I want to push back on what you just said, because I think you're assuming some things. I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but I think you're assuming things about people, that just because they want prayer in school and they want Bibles, that they don't have prayer at home, or they don't have a prayer life, or that they don't have Bibles in their home. First of all, with the phone, you don't need a Bible. So there's some people, I'm sure, who are watching this say, I pray, and I still think prayer in school is a good thing. What kind of evidence or what proof or what are you basing that kind of assumption on, that just because they want prayer in school, that they don't pray by themselves or have a prayer life?
I try not to assume, because we know what happens when you break that word down, right? What I try to do is look at credible statistics, such as several studies over years done by the Pew Foundation, which is a credible polling service. Also, PRI, which is a Christian research institute, and the Barna Group, which is in Ventura, California. They all show that as it relates to Americans, church attendance is down substantially, sharply. We see generational divide in terms of the older, say the boomers. They tend to attend church more frequently, and Generation X not so much, and everyone in between. But we see a definite trend away from church, away from regular Bible reading, and away from regular church attendance. So not church attendance, but prayer, individual prayer. So these statistics are very reliable. They're very consistent, and they're in one direction. We are moving away from dependency on God. There's a category called the religious nuns. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah, they call them the nuns.
And I think we have a stat somewhere that hopefully we can get to that, where that category, when they first start measuring it, was somewhere around 20% of people identified themselves as not being related to any particular religious group, most recently when they measured that, it was 40%. There it is. The millennials has a high religious nuns association. The boomers has the lowest, and in Generation X is 30%. So then to your pushback, Professor, I'm saying this is not something that I assume. This is something that I suspected, but this is something that I've been able to confirm in empirical data.
So you're saying that based on the trend of American religiosity, it seems to me, or seems to you, that people aren't really about that prayer life anymore, yet you have this sort of rise in Oklahoma.
They're not about spirituality.
Well, I don't think that they are about spirituality. What you're seeing with nuns is that I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I don't have any nun affiliation to any particular religious organization, but I have some kind of spirituality. Now that could be going to yoga, right? We don't know, but
I can concede that point. And so when I say spiritual, I'm actually as speaking as a baby boomer. The tail end, that's going to the mosque, the church, or the synagogue, right? That's what I'm thinking about. But I agree that it is defined much more broadly than that in this day and time. And yes, but they are not spiritual or religious in the sense that we have traditionally perceived it.
But I guess
and part of that is manifested in the fact that they're not reading these Bibles that they say they want put in the schools.
But are these the same people? Are the people who are the nuns the same people who are pushing for the Bible in the school? I would think that.
No, I just think no, not necessarily. But what I think is all Americans are reading the Bible less. Now, if you dig down into the numbers, you'll see that there's one group that kind of departs from that and is kind of resistant to that, and that's Black people. Black people are going to church less, but they're still going to church substantially more than everyone else. They're still reading the Bible more than everyone else. They're still praying on a daily basis more than everyone else. But generally speaking, Americans are just not doing the church thing or the religious thing. So then what I'm concerned about, Professor, and you don't have to agree with me, is that what we're trying to do is a patch or a substitute. That's what I'm talking about, the symbolism. So we won't go to church and we won't read our Bible, but as a trade-off or a trade-out, we'll insist that there be Bibles at the school. And maybe our children will learn about God through the process of osmosis. But my education as a human being, as a child, started with my father when I was 3 years old.
What if it's not so much that, I think there is a bit of patchwork being done, but what if it's the people who are actually praying and reading their Bible? I don't know people really reading their Bibles like that, just in common conversation. I'm like, y'all don't know some of these basic stories. But it almost seems like the people who do at least pray some recognize that there is this trend that you're talking about, and their solution is to sort of force it onto people. And I think that's kind of what's going on.
That's a possibility.
Into the public sphere by making it mandatory lessons, because that's what's going on in Oklahoma with Walters. And then you have with the Bibles, and then there's prayer. So I think you have people who aren't trending away from religion trying to reverse the trend. And so in that respect, is that a bad thing?
So these people, let's take, for example, Ryan Walters. If you look at him, you see that there's controversy that surrounds him.
Do tell.
He's one of the organizations that he led or is leading, because there was some overlay. He was an executive director of a nonprofit organization before becoming the Secretary of Education. His official salary as the Secretary of Education in the state of Oklahoma was $40,000 a year, but his salary as the executive director for an education, educational organization in Oklahoma was $120,000 a year.
That's quite the pay cut.
That is but he was not supposed to be doing it, but he was still doing his job
Of
as the
course,
executive director.
you
He
go from
didn't give that
120
job
to
up.
40.
So there was some controversy around that. But then there was some controversy around some of the programs within the state of Oklahoma's education department that received federal funds. And some of the monies were spent to buy vehicles, personal items to the tune of $1.7 million. And there's currently an FBI investigation into the mishandling and the misspending and the misappropriation of federal funds that relates to Ryan Walters. So that may seem striking, but it's a pattern I see, that the people who are screaming and yelling the most about Jesus and about God in the Bible are the people who are living a life that is furthest from the teachings of the Bible. That's what my concern is. That's why I say you're trying to substitute, you're trying to phone it in, you're trying to do patchwork, when the real remedy is to live the life, to live out the principles. If you want to be transformative in society, in an increasingly secular society, Jesus said, let your light shine.
That's what he said.
So that men may see what? Not your words, but your what?
Good works.
Your good works. And that then will bring glory to your Father, which is in heaven. But we don't want to do the good works. We want to do some dubious things. Have been the Bible talks about, let certain things not be named once among you as Christians, but some of the most deplorable things, perverse things, deeply disturbing things have not just been named once among our Christian evangelical leaders, but twice, 10 times, 3 times later. You know that you once, you twice.
Twice, 3 times you missed.
Hey.
Yes.
So we got to deal with that. And then maybe we can come back and have this conversation about Bibles at Walmart even. Or Bible.
What is going on here? I know it's hypocrisy, but what exactly then is this? If they aren't living it, then why are they trying to push it? If they're functionally acting like God does not exist, then why is it? It has to be more than they're just that being saying it's hypocrisy is describing what it is, but the why behind this sort of great discrepancy between living the faith versus actually
I think that's a good question.
And then forcing it, especially if you're going to force it on other people. It just seems to me, and I asked this question, but it seems to me that this is about control, and that's all this is. This is about maintaining white supremacy, white dominance in the world.
How many times have you been at the Gurley family dinner debate, and we have a saying about
two things can be true at the same time?
Yes.
But I'm just saying hypocrisy describes what's happening. My thing is, I think they're using the faith as a form of control and dominance, of white dominance. And that's
but isn't that, if we are understanding, and we're going inside the book now, right? Isn't that what Jesus was actually castigating and criticizing, rebuking the Pharisees about? Going across the desert to make one convert, laying on that convert heavy burdens that they won't lift with one finger. And then once they convert them, making them twofold the son of hell. It was all about control, right? When you have small people, and I don't mean as in physical sizes, but as in intellectual size, as in moral atrophy. That's what when I say small people who are challenged ethically. When you have those kind of people in positions of power, sometimes they're reverends, sometimes they're superintendents of schools, sometimes they even hold higher office than that. But when you have small people whose hands are on big institutions, such as the governorship, such as the superintendent of schools, such as being a senator, then small things happen, distortions happen. But small people are always about trying to control, right? They're always about trying to set standards for how other people should do things, while they will not hold themselves to those same standards. That's why I said at the beginning, this is about hypocrisy.
Right. It is about hypocrisy being the tool to control people. And like I said, maintain white dominance. Because if you watched the video as well that Ryan Walters posted too, what's clear to me is that there is a conflation, or maybe an equaling of patriotism and Christianity, right? To be a patriot is to be Christian in the way that they
And
imagine
so
is to
there's a
be
term for
patriot.
that now, and it's
White nationalism,
white nationalism or Christian nationalism,
Christian
right?
nationalism.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you're describing Christian nationalism when you say that conflation.
The conflation of the two,
Right.
and which is why you can have a Trump Bible that has the Constitution and the Declaration in it. And I was like, do you all realize you're equating these two, the sacred text with the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence? That could be seen as blasphemous, right? Like no one's thinking about that because in their minds, those three documents are actually all equal. And so,
Well, at least that's what's being implied, right? I
right,
mean,
yeah, that's the implication. As I said, it
side
could
by
be seen as
side, you're at least implying that.
right, right. So, I think people aren't stepping back to say, what are we actually? There was one pastor, I can't remember his name, white pastor, who went off with the Trump Bible. He's like, what are y'all doing? Y'all just worshiping a golden calf. That's essentially what this is. And that's another thing I think with Walters, when he chose out of all the Bibles to spend $6 million on, which we could talk about whether or not that was a useful, a good use of money.
It wasn't.
But he's like, well,
when I think about
that's pandering.
More recent time than the golden calf, I think about Jesus and the whip.
Right.
Right. When people start assembling in the temple for the express purpose of making some money, then our focus is out, right? I mean, this is the much larger question that underlies this conversation. What is the role of the church? What is the role of this public school system? What is the primary role? And are we doing those things, right? Getting back to the $6 million, if we needed to buy some books, if Oklahoma needed to buy some books, it shouldn't have been Trump Bibles. It should have been math books, right? I mean, we were talking about that stat that showed the rankings of public school systems in the United States. And it showed that out of all the states, the reading scores for Oklahoma was 47th out of 50. That's not too good, right? Right. And then in terms of SAT scores, and that's important. Why? Because that determines whether or not they're going to be able to get to those schools such as Dartmouth or Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Ohio State or maybe even the University of Texas. Your SAT scores, you're out there buying trunk Bibles when you should be buying SIT prep courses and reading courses. And then there was some other stats that deal with their math scores, right? I think that school can do a lot of different things, but what it has to do and what it has to focus on, public schools, is reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? I mean, that's the core function of the public school system. If you haven't mastered that, then let's spend some time and resources dealing with that. So I really think that that is in many ways a misapplication and a wrongful appropriation of public dollars.
Which apparently you've already told us that he's done, that he's been accused of. But I'm pretty sure he would push back and say, this is just your liberal woke ideology at play here. Because again, his thing is, we were doing fine. We were leading in the world. I guess academically, we were leading in the world until prayer was taken out. And so him buying the Bibles actually is necessary in order to get these math scores together.
Well, the objective evidence will not permit that for us to come to that absurd conclusion, because at the other end of the spectrum, you have Massachusetts. I don't know if prayer is permitted in the school and Bibles are being handed out in the public school system in Massachusetts. But if I were a betting man, I would say, no, it's not happening. So then what accounts for their success? It's not certainly the presence of the Bibles. And listen, folks, this all may seem strange that you'd be hearing a pastor say this, but listen, I'm a proponent of true religion, of good religion, as James talked about it in his epistle, which is undefiled, which is to care about those who are marginalized, to look out for the poor, to take care of the widowers and the strangers, the things that the very people that Jesus talked about in his book, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25. I'm about demonstrating my transformation and letting my light shine by being like Christ and not like Elon Musk. The issue is that we worship the God of materialism and power and prosperity in this country. And that's the contaminant. And that's the contagion that has taken the church itself off its moorings and off its foundation. And so we got to deal with that. And putting Bibles in schools is not going to solve that problem.
Right. Not if the contaminant is deeper than just something physical.
If the Word of God, and since you're talking through the pastor, I'm going to keep diving into the book. If we don't get to that place where David was when he said, "Thy word
have I hidden in my heart so that I might not
sin in my heart, not in my classroom."
Not right. No, it's true. And a lot of what I'm hearing you saying, it has to be a heart work, right? It's internal. It does not matter what you have in schools if it's not inside of you, if you're not demonstrating it, if you're not living. I think too, because part of the reason why people fall away from the faith is because of this hypocrisy that they see, right? You have people pointing to that. There's like, oh, I heard such and such saying this, but they're living one way. And so if you got people like Ryan Walters promoting prayer and Bible and Trump Bibles, but then now he's under investigation for misappropriation of funds, people looking
Millions.
like, ain't about that life. You know what I mean? And so it's like that actually is more damaging to the faith than taking Bibles out of the school.
I hate to drag a good name through the mud, but here we go. Jerry Falwell Jr.
Oh gosh. Is that a good name?
Well, okay, I'm just going to leave it out there. Y'all decide.
I'm just posing a question.
Jerry Falwell Jr., the former president of Liberty University, a Christian university, producing people that are going to change the world, win the world for Christ. He's having a three-way relationship with his pool boy where he watches a young man have sex with his wife while he's over there pleasuring himself in the corner. This is how we change the world. But we love Jesus, and we're taking certain stances on certain volatile political issues. But it is not about our positions. That's the thing, again, that I'm trying to stress. It's about the actual manner in which we live our lives. That's where the power is to transform and to impact a lost world, a increasingly secularized society. It's in how we live.
I want to ask you a question. This will help because you did like African history or Christian, what is it? Christian history in Africa. I'm probably messing it up. What you were doing for Bible study. But why do you think that we have that here in the West, particularly in this country, this emphasis on sort of right theology, right doctrine, and a de-emphasis on orthopraxy? So orthodoxy versus orthopraxy. So what we practice. Why do you think, what's kind of the roots to that? And just as a hint, given to sort of the Hellenistic version of Christianity that emerges versus the more African version.
I've written on this before. Hopefully I'll have a chance to lecture on this sometime soon. Shameless plug for anyone who wants to invite me to talk about this. But really, if we get down to it, historically, we practice a westernized form of Christianity, which is a Greek influence Christianity. See, the Greeks, they were concerned about thinking right. They were not concerned, we know this because we know their whole history. They were, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, they were, if you listen to the scholars of the West, they'll tell you they were great thinkers. If you read some of their writings, they will tell you, man, what we know, we learned in Africa. We learned in Kemet. The first philosophers were Kemet, were people that were from what we know today as modern day Egypt. But these philosophers like Pythagoras, like Hippocrates, who we say was the first physician, he will tell you, those people will tell you that they learned what they learned and what they knew, whatever they knew, they learned it in Africa. But now how they put it into practice was different. The Africans put a lot of emphasis in their religious expressions on the execution, not just, okay, there has to be a connection, a correlation between how I think and how I behave, right? And the Greeks, not so much. They're like, as long as I think about God in the right way, Jesus is fully God, fully man, third person in the Trinity. He is fully of the same essence of God. And if you disagree, they will kill you. You know, the early church, you know, they were heavy on, you got to think right. But at the same time, some of these Greek people, not Greek Christians, but just Greeks in general who were quote unquote heavy thinkers, they thought on this level and then they lived on a level that was quite perverse. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to go into details. So there's always been this departure, or this disconnect, as it were, I think, and this is just my conclusion, between how they thought and how they lived. But Christianity and other forms of religion that emerged in Africa or that was proliferated throughout Africa, there was always, okay, yeah, let's bring it out of the clouds and let's see it manifest in what we do, what we say. We have to feel it. You know, it was a soul-based thing. And it's interesting because in the 70s, some of the music that Black people popularized was referred to as soul music.
Right. And then I remember a pastor saying, I can't have a faith that I can't feel sometimes.
Right. So we feel it. We are more, in one sense, mystical in how we execute. We believe in that God speaks more than other people. We go to church more than other people. We assign tremendous amount of weight to dreams, which is a clear African thing that goes all the way back thousands of years, all the way back to Kemet, by the way. And I would say even beyond the formation of Kemet. My point is that we have always, we meaning now, speaking about people of African descent, had a certain approach toward Christianity that was more about a practical expression that demonstrated a transformation in our lives. Yeah. And we still do.
So do you think that accounts for why, when you earlier you gave the statistic that there, even though our numbers are diminished as far as who goes to church, we still have a higher percentage of people who go to church? Do you think that's rooted in the fact that for African Americans, our faith, it hasn't just been cerebral, but it's been cerebral, but emotional, as well as just sort of, as you said, mystical. Like we worship God with the full body. I'm not saying that white people don't, but
the full self.
Full self. We recognize that there are elements about this that we can't understand. Like if we could fully grasp God, that is he God? So we understand that, and we have to sense and sort of release. Do you think that's part of what's going on here? Is that there's a deeper understanding, not understanding, but just a deeper kind of experience, or a different type of experience?
A more tenured experience, if you would. Anthropologists tell us that the first human beings lived in Africa. And we, in fact, had the unique and wonderful experience of visiting the Great Rift Valley this past summer, where humanity began. But everything began there, not just humanity itself, but man reaching out to God, God reaching out to man, right? Music and any initial primitive forms of education, everything, the first of everything happened there. So in one sense, people of African descent, in a much broader sense, all human beings are people of African descent, but in the narrow sense that we're speaking about it now, people who look like you and me, we've been at it for a while, trying to feel God. And keep this in mind, Christianity is a relatively new religion against the great backdrop of time, of human history recorded. But so God has not just most recently started speaking to men with the onset of quote unquote Christianity. God's been speaking to human beings forever, right? That's one thing the one message that you should get from the Bible, that God cares about all people. God's been speaking to all people in different ways at different times.
Now you're trying to go into a whole other topic
Maybe so. But what I'm
That's
trying
another
to say
conversation
is,
about God speaking, because I can hear, are you saying that all faith, God is in all faith?
no,
We're
I'm
not gonna
not
get into that.
saying
That's a
that
whole other
God is
conversation.
in all religions, but God is in a whole lot more places than we want to admit and acknowledge. And certainly he is in Africa,
Right.
and he is in Asia, and he's in every part of the earth. If we're just narrowing the conversation to Christianity, Jesus' great commission was this: go and teach the gospel and make disciples of all men. Go to the four corners of the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? So typically the story is told to us as Christianity progressed west into Europe.
Right. That's
And that
church
is
history.
presented to
When
us
I went
as
to
the
school.
whole story.
Yeah.
But we know as early as 200 AD, there was a strong Christian church in India. Okay. We know that by 60 AD, Christianity had made its way all the way into modern day Ethiopia and perhaps even modern day Sudan. Christian traditions hold that Matthew, the apostle Matthew, came to Ethiopia and preached the gospel and established a church there. Christianity is more, it has a longer tenure in Africa than it does Europe, particularly Western Europe. Okay.
Right.
And so we don't know the whole story. Sometimes when our young African American brothers and sisters say that Christianity is a white man religion, that's a half-truth statement, right? Because how it is being presented and practiced, it with this symbolism over substance,
Mm-hmm.
is definitely a Western tradition, a Greek influenced tradition approach to Christianity and approach toward religion in general. But the original form of Christianity, the one that came to Ethiopia, the one that came to Alexandria, Egypt, in 33, not too many years after Christ died, is something quite different. Something
Right.
quite different.
And I always say that one of the biggest vestiges of colonialism and white supremacy is the very idea that Christianity is this white man's religion, because that's another area where they have colonized you, right? Like that's just not accurate. Christianity really was, they call it the Middle East now, which is a new term, but the Middle East is what? Asia, right? So
it's Asian,
most
yeah.
of the Bible is it from in Asia and Africa, and then like you said, it doesn't even hit Western Europe. Western Europe's not even mentioned. So the idea that this faith that starts in Asia is a white man's religion, to me, is just an indication, not that it is, but that is still an area where white supremacy holds.
They did a good job, right? I mean, but look, when you pick up the King James Bible, what do you see? White Jesus. You see white God with his finger reaching down to Adam, right? You see white Adam and Eve. You see white angels.
Right.
You know, you see, in one sense, let me be balanced and say this, that most religions express and try to conceive of God as they know him through terms which are familiar and expressions which are familiar. So if you had a chance to go to the city of Aksum in the country of Ethiopia, formerly the Empire of Aksum, and you were able to go into some of those churches and look behind the curtains and at the oldest Bible and look at the images of the Madonna, Mary, and the baby Jesus, you're going to see a black figure. You're going to see a black Mary, you're going to see a black Jesus, a black Joseph. And I don't think that that's sacrilegious. I just think that that's what human beings do. They construe God through their narrow human lens and their narrow human experiences.
Right. But then, of course, I saw, I don't know if it was an article or something of history of Ebony in the 60s had an image of black Jesus, and apparently people were almost about to cancel Ebony. Now, I have not verified this story, but I don't find it hard to believe that people were really up in arms of when, to your point, yes, people will paint their understanding of God in their image, but it seems whenever black people do it in the West, then it's a problem. You know, all of a sudden.
I agree with that. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, like you said. Now we're going to.
Now we're going to a whole other topic. We ain't
If
going
You remember when we, of course, a couple of weeks back now, we did the story about plantation churches, plantation Christianity. We talked about the black church, and so many people rebuked me in their comments. And right now, the comments are still going on. I'm sure someone rebuked me tonight when he left a comment behind. There's no such thing as a black church. Well, at what level are we discussing this matter? Obviously, in heaven, of course, there's no such thing as a black church. But on earth, there was and there is a black church because it grew out of the formation and the oppression of white Christians. So it's very much a tangible, real thing and not necessarily a negative thing. But no one has a problem when you put Asian church or Greek Orthodox church or Lutheran church, in other words, that modifier or that adjective in front of the word church. But when you put black in front of anything, it's a problem. If I say black power,
right? Black lives matter.
Black lives matter.
Just matter, not just better. That they just matter.
Somehow that is subversive, right?
That's the wild. That's when I knew. I said, "Oh, they not gonna let it. We're not gonna get free. If you have a problem with us just saying our lives matter, because you're reading so much into it.
This country has black anxiety.
Well, I mean, sure. If you
underneath that, there is black guilt. There is unresolved guilt.
It's white guilt about black people. Don't put.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
They are afraid that the roosters are coming back. The chickens are coming back to roost. Yeah. That the going around and the coming around is coming around.
The come-uppins is coming up.
Coming-uppins is coming. And you know what? In the grand scheme of things, from a divine perspective, that's not that concern is not too far afield. But it won't be the black people doing it. It will be God Himself. God Himself insists on justice in His universe, in His world.
But if we just get enough Bibles in school,
we
bring prayer back.
No.
We too, because that's what the founding fathers were about, and that's another thing I wanted to.
Well, let's just talk about because John Adams.
Well, first of all, again, getting back to Walters in that video, I believe it was in that video. If not that, then maybe the interview where he was mentioning how the founding fathers were, I don't know if he said Christian, but they were people of faith. And maybe I'm not saying exactly, but I know if others have said there's the narrative that the founders were people of faith, and that's what they set up. Like I said, the Puritans, but even I'm not gonna call them founding fathers, but the founders.
I don't refer to them.
Yeah, they were the ones who did that, but that's
not my fathers. They are the founders, though. Respectfully,
they might have been our fathers, but they were the forceful fathers onto their.
My fathers were enslaved.
No, but and some of our fathers were the slavers. Let's just be real here. Hello, Jefferson and Sally Hemings.
On your mama's side. But speaking about that, because we hear this often, right? I wanted to speak up very quickly about two of the founders. One is John Adams, the second president of the United States. Is that right?
Second or third.
Okay. No, one of them. Yeah. Okay. This is what he said.
Jefferson was the third.
The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion.
We were founded as a Christian nation. Now that's what it was. That's what he was saying. We were founded as a Christian nation. People firmly believe that.
Who said that? Because I
believe it was Ryan Walters who was saying we were founded.
And I'm just saying John Adams said nope.
But John Adams is just one of the founders.
Okay, here's another guy that we love to celebrate. The writer, the author of the Declaration of Independence. You know him, Thomas Jefferson.
TJ.
This is what his contemporary said about him. They referred to him as the champion of atheism and immorality because he denied the deity of Jesus and did not think that the Bible was God's word and rejected the Christian concept of hell as a state of everlasting punishment. Yet he greatly admired Jesus' secular teachings and assembled them in a small book referred to as the Jefferson Bible. He was a deist.
Well, most of the founders were deists.
So, folks, that's the cold. Those are the cold hard facts. Thomas Jefferson wrote his own Bible. Now, his family's been very reticent to have that out there in the public space because they understand the implications of that. But Thomas Jefferson did not believe that Jesus was the Son of God in the traditional sense that Orthodox Christians embraced that. Didn't believe in hell.
And had his own Bible. So let
Had
me
his own Bible. He beat Trump to this.
Before there was Trump, there was TJ. Right.
Right. You need to get a copy of the Thomas Jefferson
Bible. He had
Trump
his own Bible.
Behind. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Where he just like, this is actually it. This is what I got. So Trump is just following into tradition. We over here hating on Trump, but Trump's like, listen, I'm just doing what has been done before me, and I'm gonna make some money because that's what I do.
In my estimation, Trump was about making money. Thomas Jefferson was a person who was shaped by the Enlightenment period, if you know that part of American, not American, but European history, actually.
Right.
Thomas Hobbes, the Leviathan, who wrote the Leviathan, John Locke, David, Henry David Thoreau. Those philosophers were heavy on thinking a certain way, and the reason why they called Thomas Jefferson, what did they call him? They said that he was a champion atheist and the champion of immorality, because Thomas Jefferson, who was in theory against slavery, had slaves and slept with and created or had children with Sally Hemings. So his life was a living contradiction, but that is the kind of Christianity, or that is the religious foundation that this country was built upon. Contradictions, saying one thing and in our lives being completely, a Christianity that is based upon the idea that we can take people's stuff and take the Native Americans' land and kill them when they resist, and typecast them and demonize them as savages.
Right.
And when the enslaved Africans who insist on asserting their birthright to be free rise up and resist the violence that's being visited upon them, refer to that as a rebellion. Think about that term. That's a condescending, crazy term for one human being to use against another human being when you both are equally human. And I say, I'm going to assert my humanity, and you say, no, you're rebelling.
Well, it's also, think about it, during the Revolutionary War, you have them writing these letters to the king talking about their slaves. They've been enslaved. Meanwhile, they have actual slaves, people who cannot leave, people who are not free, but they're characterizing themselves as slaves to the crown. I think that kind of cognitive dissonance is built into the foundation of this country, which is what
you have to give it to them. They had something a little bit more serious going on than what the enslaved in America had. They had taxation without representation.
And that was their slavery. Again, meanwhile, you have actually enslaved people who cannot go anywhere. Forget taxation without representation. They're not even recognized as human, right? They're seen as property. And that's how you can do that. It's that kind of, like I said, that cognitive dissonance, although for them, it's not cognitive dissonance, because it's like, well, no, you're property. I don't see you as human. So of course you're not the same as me. Of course I can say that I'm a slave and then not at all consider what's going on with you. But that sort of, the best way, cognitive dissonance is built into the foundation of this country. And it's plays out in different ways.
That's a big term, Professor Brooke. Cognitive dissonance. What does that mean?
So it's like there's just discrepancy between, you have disparate thoughts that exist in your head as one, and they really should contradict each other. Say that again?
Lawyers use that term, disparate.
Disparate, different. So on the one hand, you're saying I'm a slave because I have to, and slavery is bad. Okay, sure. But then you have actual slaves. You are a slave master. And so it's like, if you really thought slavery was bad, then you wouldn't have slaves.
So
Or
how
you
can
have,
these divergent perspectives live in
yeah,
your
different divergent perspectives and
in your
ideas that
heart?
exist inside of someone
Okay.
that shouldn't. So the
So
idea again
this is the
that,
criticism that our detractors and our enemies have of America
right,
today.
in general, it's like you're saying you promote freedom, but you have this high rate of imprisonment, higher than any other place. You know,
Right.
why are you imprisoning your people at this high rate?
High,
Is it really
high
bad?
rate. Let me give you just some, of course, I've done some research on that very topic. The average imprisonment rate, and they do that in terms of so many people in prison per 100,000 citizens. And I think the average imprisonment rate per 100,000 around the world is something like 120. Okay. And don't quote me on this, but something like that. Okay. Well, America's average imprisonment rate is 850 per 100,000. That's across America, right? But then when you talk about Black people in America, then the imprisonment rate is 200 2,600 per 100,000. Okay. But then when you talk about Black men, it bumps up to something like 8,000 per 100,000. So, I mean, it's off the charts.
Right.
And some may say, well, of course it's off the charts because Black people are more
Criminally prone.
prone to criminal behavior. Well, if that were so, then that would hold true in Nigeria. We're looking at their stats, which is somewhere around 44 per 100,000.
Well,
Or
no, but then you
Kenya.
would just say there to that. It's like, no. Of course, they're all criminals, so that's why they're not locking each other up, because
Yeah.
criminals aren't going to
What
lock
I'm
up.
saying is, whatever it is, assume for a moment that, and I don't concede that point at all, but let's say we were going to entertain that. We would have to agree that whatever the corruption of the Black man is, it happened in America. And it ain't going on in the United States. It's not even going on in the United Kingdom. This is a uniquely American phenomena, and I will tell you that the get tough on crime, which actually, as a manifestation in the practical matter, was get tough on Black men.
Mm-hmm.
It took roots and began to accelerate. If you've seen charts and you see a J curve, you know what a J curve is. You know that that's intentional human behavior. When you're looking at a statistical chart and you see a J curve, you see that J curve right around 1980. That's when Ronald Reagan became the president of the United States, and they launched that. And interestingly, it was also at the tail end of the last significant civil rights laws that were passed in this country. Right. Immediately when we had quote unquote overcome, and we were now preparing to build monuments and have holidays, someone was plotting and planning to reverse the tide. And today we're dealing with that still, right now, in this very moment. The tide has been reversed.
Yeah. But we love Jesus because we want Bibles.
But we are an America, but we are a Christian nation.
But we're a Christian nation. We're in prison.
We have proof of it because we have $6 million worth of Bibles.
Because we have what?
$6 million worth of Bibles for Oklahoma. No math books, no reading books.
No math books.
No SAT prep books, but we have Bibles.
But we have Bibles. Now, what do you think? And we can sort of wrap this up because I feel like we're going in different directions, which is great. We'll have to come back and talk about, though, what you just said, even that unnatural J curve.
J curve, yeah.
J curve, what's going on there and how that's about to play out. But I want to ask you, what do you suspect will be the outcome? Because there's no way this isn't ending up in federal court, potentially to the United States Supreme Court. I don't have much faith in the current Supreme Court. It is heavily conservative. They just have this recent trend of promoting religious liberty, although I think sometimes it oversteps its boundaries. Mm-hmm. Do you think the Supreme Court will uphold what's happening in Oklahoma? Because I know that's what they want. Oklahoma wants this to go to Supreme Court and have them rubber stamp it. Similar to that, like I said, that praying coach case in Kennedy, where the coach was praying on the 50-yard line after the game, and the Supreme Court said that's fine, that's religious liberty. I think that was overstepping the bounds. Do you think that Ryan Walters will be able to prevail if he goes to the Supreme Court?
How do you define prevail?
That the court would say that he has the constitutional right to
I think
have this video and play it, and then to buy these Bibles. I don't know how in the world, but yet I know that courts can do these mental gymnastics if they start at a point of wanting to justify something. And you see this with the immunity case. If you start with a point of I want to do this,
and that's the reference point in my mind. Let's talk about the fact that the courts do not make their decisions in a vacuum. They're not immune to public sentiment. They are aware of it, and to some degree, whether consciously or unconsciously, they are affected by it. They're human beings. That I do not assign any unholy or improper motive. I'm just simply saying you never escape the fact that you're a human being, no matter what you're doing. That said, looking at what the courts did with respect to former President Trump's immunity question, the court fashioned some narrow response that gave him not all he wanted, but something. And so I suspect that if this issue makes its way, the issue of Bibles in the school system, purchasing Bibles and teaching the Bible in the school system, if it makes its way before the Supreme Court, my anticipation is that some level, some degree of permission will be granted. Okay? That's what my broad suspicion is, that there will be some degree of permission granted, not all, but some.
right?
And let me just kind of zoom out, because that's my micro statement. Let me zoom out and make a macro statement. My belief, and this is predicated upon my research of human history, and of court decisions, going back to the 1883 civil rights cases, and going back to 1896, and let me actually focus on 1896 and 1954. Those both dealt with the same constitutional amendment, right?
Would say that 1950, what, the 14th
1954 and 1896.
The 14th Amendment, yeah.
Is Plessy versus Ferguson. 1954 is Brown versus the Board of Education, both dealing with what are the requirements of the 14th Amendment as it relates to this issue of race, separation of races. And the 14th Amendment wasn't amended in any way, but what changed? Two different outcomes. What changed?
The court.
The constitution of the court, the makeup of the court. So the makeup of the court will determine really, and we all know this is why each president tries to put his person on the court, as many people in the judgeships, and that's just how this government works. We all know this, that's a part of this process. The constitution of the court will determine what the outcome is. We can pretty much anticipate what the outcome might be. Again, I'm going to say I don't know, but I strongly suspect. Because now let me zoom out a little bit further. What are laws? What are laws? Are they permanent markers of what is expected, what is moral, what is right, what is good, what is desirable? Are they permanent markers? No. But they are the codified views of what is good and desirable for the current generation. Each successive generation gets to decide whether they will accept that, embrace that, and perpetuate that or not. They can repeal laws, they can add new laws, they can add regulations, but what we need to understand in the much broader sense is that the law is always in flux. As a minister, the one thing that I love about the Bible, when we're talking about not that we can put it in schools, but what I really actually love about the Bible is that it doesn't change. It's reliable. Its guidance is certain and sure. And I can come back to it in 10 years. It will not be amended. And I can trust it and build my life around it. The laws of human beings, not so much.
Amen to that. It won't change.
Yeah.
Now, people will interpret it differently, but that's a whole other thing.
Mhm.
Now, I will say this, and then we're going to wrap up. I think whatever happens when it gets to the Supreme Court, Alito's going to write the opinion, and it's going to be some very Hobby Lobby type of reasoning. Anyway, that being said, thank you all for joining us again on this episode of whatever this is.
Just remember also, we're not talking about nobody. We're just talking about what we're talking about.
Just talking about what we're talking about, although I'm talking about which judge I think is actually going to write this opinion, because I've seen this. Anyway, that's my prediction on who's going to write it. Nevertheless, again, thank you all for joining us. Please, if you like this video, like it, share it. You can follow us on social media. The information should be below. I'm Brooke Gurley, and this is my father. And your name is, I'll let you say it.
Jerry Gurley, pastor, and sometimes civil rights lawyer.
Primarily, well, I don't know about primarily. Civil rights attorney, pastor. I'm a runaway civil rights attorney and a professor. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, please leave comments. We love to read your comments. And we also love to sometimes get in there and argue right along with you. Until next time.
All about the argument.
Until next time, y'all stay blessed.